All right, good morning. And as always, welcome to Beach Creek Baptist Church. We're so glad to be here this morning. We're so glad each one of you are here this morning. We do have a few missing this morning, and we do miss them, but we're thankful for those of you that are here and those of you that are joining us online. As always, we do want to invite you. I just want to remind you to come hang out with us for a little bit. I think you will be blessed. I think some of you might have to drive a little ways to get here, but I think I know it'll be worth the drive, especially here in a couple weeks. February 12th, we're going to be having a Valentine's get together, party, hang out, whatever you want to call it, after the services on February the 12th. So we would love for you to join us. But if you want to show up that morning at 9 o'clock, we'll be having Sunday school. 9:45, we come in for worship. 10 o'clock, we do go live on both Facebook and YouTube with the messages. Also, sign up for the text alerts. That information will be right there on your screens. Also, I don't think I've said this in a while, but if you want to mail in your tithes and offerings, Nolan can throw that up on the screen, I think, if he remembers how to do that. There's the text information right there. And if you do want to mail in your tithes and offerings, we do get those. We do appreciate those, and we do take those. More people and just be there for people. And we are thankful. We have been blessed as a church that we are able to do. We're not a big church. You see that, you know that, but God has blessed us and we're able to do things. And I hope in the coming up year, we're going to continue to do things and more things. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Also, I always remind you, if you're listening online, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, hit that like button. Hit the share button, leave a comment, and let us know that you're listening. I go back, I see those, and it's encouraging to me. It's encouraging to the church as well. If the church gets on, those of you that are here, if you ever go back and get online, you see those that are joining us, and we do have several of you that I appreciate that you're with us regularly on Sundays. But like I said, love to have you here if you're able to come and to join us. So this morning, we're going to start a new series and calling it Magnetic. And so let's just get going this morning. I'll get more into why we're calling it magnetic. You know, there's something I believe that we all take for granted. There's something that we really think very little about throughout the course of a week, except maybe one day a week. We really think about it and we really focus on it. And you can probably guess what that is. It's church. Christianity as a whole. In reality, if we're honest with ourselves, most of us don't think about it that much during the week. As a pastor, I don't get that opportunity much because literally I'm thinking about it or praying about it or studying about it every day. But I know what it's like to not think about it. I can go days without thinking about it. Yet one of the most amazing statistics that you will ever hear is that 1 out of every 3 people, not in Muhlenberg, not in Kentucky, not in America, but on this planet, 1 out of every 3 people on this planet, that equals out to around 2.2 billion people. Think about that. 2.2 billion people claim to be Christians and are part of the church. Now, that's amazing to me. And it's amazing for several reasons. Because it doesn't feel that way a lot of times. Hey, that's one thing that's amazing to me. But if you think about it and you go back to the very first church 2,000 years ago, that church started with about 120 people. At the end of the first century, that 120 people had turned into fewer than 10,000 Christians, and it made up only 0.00017%. 10,000 people out of the 60 million people were there in that Roman Empire at that time. By the year 200, it had multiplied and there were 200,000 believers in the Roman Empire in 100 years. gained over 190,000 believers, making up 0.36%, 0.36%. By the year 250, almost 2% of the population, more than 1 million people, were Christians. And just 2 generations later, by the year 300, Christians made up approximately 10% of the population, numbering over 6 million people. I got more. It goes on. By the 4th century, there were 35 million Christians in the ancient world, and if you do the math, Christianity grew 40%, roughly 40% per decade for hundreds of years. That's amazing to me. That's unbelievable. I mean, the question is not how did the early church survive? It was really how did the early church thrive? That is what I would call thriving. I mean, the odds in Las Vegas would have been stacked against the church doing anything besides dying out. That's what you think it would have done. In fact, the founder of the church and Christianity was a peasant, a carpenter from a no-name town in a small country that was under the dominance of the. It really didn't stand a chance. In the beginning, Christianity was considered depraved, and it was in many parts illegal, that you really couldn't even be a part of it. The persecution of Christians was relentless and it was unending. At least 2 of the persecutions were empire-wide with the intent, think about this, the intent of the Roman Empire, which was the most powerful thing at that time, the intentions of it was to destroy Christianity. But yet, thousands of years later, it's still going, and there's 2.2 billion people who claim Christian. In fact, the earliest Christians, they didn't even have church buildings like we have. They met in homes, regular homes. They had no access to the mass media of the day. They had little money, absolutely no political influence. There was nobody that they could look to think, and to follow. They didn't have a Twitter account, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. They didn't have those things. But yet from 120 people. And we're still here today. After the Apostle Paul, if you think about it, they really didn't even have big name missionaries. The faith spread through run-of-the-mill, ordinary people from all walks of life who had simply given their life to Jesus. To me, that's amazing. It's astounding. Early Christianity was primarily an urban faith. In the beginning, it really established itself in the inner cities, right there in that Roman Empire. Most of the people, they lived together in very crowded areas, and Christianity exploded primarily because of the way unbelievers saw that the way believers lived so close to each other on a daily basis. That's what they saw. They saw them together. They saw how they lived and what they did for one another. In other words, the church did not grow because people were forced into it. People weren't coerced into it. They weren't even talked into it. People were drawn to the church kind of like metal is drawn to a magnet. They were drawn to it. There was something about it that just appealed to them. They couldn't even resist that. So the question is, what made the early church so magnetic? Or really, what makes any church magnetic to attract people? So that's why today we're going to start this series calling it Magnetic. Because if you're like me, you want to be a magnetic church. We want to be a church, I hope, that is drawing people here. We want to be a church filled with people who want to come to this church and who want others to come to this church as well. Amen? I'll read that again because I want that to sink in. That we want to be a church that is filled with people who want to be at this church and who want others to also come and be a part of this church. And so today we're going to begin with what I believe is the very first foundational quality that makes a church magnetic, that makes a church appealing. And I'm not even the one saying this. In fact, we're going to see what Jesus said. What Jesus said would make a church magnetic. What was it that was going to draw people? Because we need to hear what Jesus had to say, because on so many accounts, the church in reality is falling out of favor. Isn't it? There are a lot of people that want to blame culture because of that too. And I get that. We want to blame culture because the church isn't what it used to be. It doesn't feel like it used to feel. It doesn't seem to do what it used to do. And so we want to blame culture. We want to blame those on the outside of the church for what is taking place on the inside of the church, because the outside of the church is becoming more and more secular. It's becoming more and more resistant to truth. And I get it. That's part of it. But I believe the bigger problem, a bigger part of the problem, is the church itself. Far too many churches, instead of being magnets that draw people to the church, I think a lot of these churches have become monuments that spend more time repelling people than they do drawing people. And I believe one of the reasons is because we've forgotten something that Jesus spoke in some of his last words that he had with his disciples right before the crucifixion. We've talked about what Jesus said on the cross, but this was leading up to the cross, before all hell broke loose, if you will. Turn with me to John chapter 13 this morning. I'm just going to have 2 verses for you that I want to share with you, but I have 3 points, so you know I have to have 3 points, but just 2 verses. And when you get there, what you're going to find in just a moment is that Jesus tells us that the first quality of the church that will be magnetic is what I would call crazy love. Crazy love. And I call it crazy love, not just love, but it's crazy love because of this. Everybody out of the over 7, almost 8 billion people in the world, all those that have ever existed and all those that will ever exist, everybody loves something or somebody. Everybody. Think about it. Even the worst people in the world loves someone. It might be their kids, it might be their mom, it might be a best friend, it might be a pet that they have. But they love somebody. Because everybody loves love. We even have a holiday coming up, men, here in a couple of weeks, that's just focused solely on love. But the kind of love that Jesus tells us that we should have, it's a crazy kind of love. It's a different kind of love. It's a new kind of love that is Yes. Am I back on? Oh, okay. For 3 years, he always put them first. You may think that kind of love is impossible, but that little phrase, as I, Jesus said, just as I, that little phrase, as I, is not just a comparative phrase, but it is also a causative phrase. In other words, it can be translated from. Let me give you an example. This verse could be translated so you would say it like this. You are to give the love to others that I have given to you. That's what Jesus was saying. That same love that I've given you, you need to turn around and give that to others. If you're a follower of Jesus, you not only have Jesus in you, but you have the love of Jesus in you. That kind of love that Jesus had was not so much in words as it was in deeds. Jesus never just said, I loved you, but he showed he loved you. He showed it by healing the sick. He showed it by feeding the hungry. He showed it by ministering to the hurting. He showed it by dying for a lost world that hates him. He said, I love you. I believe if you just open your eyes, and this is the meat of it right here. This is what this message and the next 2 or 3 messages is all about. You and I just open our eyes to look around us, and there are opportunities, I believe, all around us for you and I to show our love all over this church and all over this community. I believe one of the biggest opportunities as a church that we're missing, listen to my heart here, is through our Sunday school. We are missing out on what we could be doing. And I've said it before. You want to grow as a church, it's not going to happen because of the preaching. I don't care who you have up here. The best way, and here's what happens. If you grow because of preaching, people are following the preacher. And the preacher leaves, people are probably going to go with him. That's not how you grow. The best way to grow is between relationships with the people in the church. And the best way to do that is through Sunday school. And we have an opportunity to grow our Sunday school, starting with the children's ministry. I think that is so important. How do you do that? You love sacrificially. You give of yourself, you give of your time, you give of your effort. You do more than show up on a Sunday morning. You have to invest into it to see the benefits. And if you invest into the children's ministry, who brings the children to church? Their parents. If you're investing into the children, then you turn around, you can invest into the parents. And then you have growth. You have people coming. And here's the thing. Most people, and I've talked about this, most people don't go to a church, and I think a lot of times we're waiting for someone else to show up so we can do something. But most people, when they're looking for a church, they're looking for a church for what can they do for me? People don't go to other churches saying, is there an opportunity for me to serve here? Are there things for me to do here? I'm looking to serve and to do. I don't want to just come and show up. No, most people that are looking for a church are looking for a place they can come and show up. And if you don't have something for them, when they show up, they're not coming back. That wasn't correct English, but y'all get the point. And it's just the fact of the matter. And so we have an opportunity to love through Sunday school, through growth. We can love others not only doing that, we can love others who don't even go to this church by getting involved in giving. And I think we do a good job of that by donating food and donating clothes to people who don't have enough food and people who don't have enough clothes. If God's blessed you, it's not so you can God blesses you, and I've said it 1,000 times, so you can be a blessing. The song we sung earlier, Lord, make me a river. In other words, flow through me. Take it and I can give it back out. I think as Christians, we should be some of the biggest givers this world has. I don't say this to brag. And please don't take it as bragging, because I just want you to see my heart. I think as Christians, when we go to restaurants, I think we should be big tippers. Big tippers. Put it down there. If you have to eat less so you can tip more, eat less so you can tip more. You never know the impact you can have on a single mom who's working at a restaurant, who is struggling to pay her bills because you left a little more of a tip. And don't think they don't know who leaves the tips and who doesn't. And especially if you go out to eat after church on a Sunday, they know you've been to church. They know where you've been. Have an opportunity to have an influence and to share love with other people. And we do that as a church. We do that with our benevolence. And listen, we can be more. We can give more. We're not hurting financially. Okay? I believe all about saving for a rainy day. We've saved. We can handle several raining days. God's blessed us. I think we need to be a river where that blessing is flowing. And I believe, personally, we can do more. Love. Love. Listen, we're here to love them, those that are outside, whether they're a different color, whether they're a different political persuasion, whether they're a different socioeconomic level. You and I are to love one another. We are to love them the same way that Jesus loves us. And if you want to know what real love is, don't look at culture, look at Christ. Don't look at Hollywood, look at heaven. We have a mandate from heaven. Jesus said, love one another. And we have the model that you and I are to follow in Jesus Christ. We are to show love. And do you know what the end result of that will be? Do you know what will happen when we do that? We will show our love. Number 3, we will share the Lord. It got hot in here, Cecil. My hair's all wet. My eyebrows. Jesus gives us the secret to this magnetic love, and it's verse 35. The Bible says, by this new command that I'm giving you to love one another, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Think about it. Do you see how different this is in the way that so many churches, a lot of churches are thinking? How is the Lord really going to know that Jesus really makes a difference? How is the unbeliever going to know that this thing called Christianity is really a game changer? Here's the thing, it won't be by how much that we say we love God. It won't be by how much we say that we love Jesus, because a lot of times that's just really just talk. And people don't want to hear us talk. People want to see. People want to see action. Jesus said the way you become a magnet that will draw people, not to you, by the way. We're not trying to draw people to us, but we want to draw people to Him. And the way you will do that, the way you will make people sit up and pay attention and say, well, you know what, maybe there really is something about this Christianity business. Maybe Jesus really does make a difference, and maybe I should follow Him. Jesus says it's when we love one another. The world is not going to know that you and I are followers of Jesus just because we have a bumper sticker on our car, or because we wear a lapel on our coat, or maybe even a cross around our neck. They're going to know it and believe it when they see you and I loving one another in a way that they are not loved by the outside world. Because the outside world will love you and leave you. If you mess up, they're done with you. But I believe as a church, even when people mess up, you know what we should be doing? Loving them. When they fall short and they do things that we don't agree with, that we believe is not biblically, you know what we should still be doing as a church? Loving them. I might not approve, but I accept you because I love you. Because I love you. How do you know just from looking at someone on the outside that they're a follower of Jesus? And I would say a lot of you will probably agree with this about how I was raised to believe. A lot of you were probably raised to believe this as well. I was raised to believe that if you don't drink and you don't smoke and you don't go to bars and you don't watch R-rated movies, and if you don't, are you hearing me? If you don't do this and you don't do that, and if you don't do X, you don't do Y, you don't do Z, that would be a way that people would know that you're a Christian. And then there's some truth to that. I'm not saying go out and do all those things. There is some truth to that, and that's great. But in reality, that's not what Jesus taught. He never teaches that. He never focused on that. And some of you aren't going to like this, or some of you won't even believe it, but there are people who listen to this who are probably not believers, who are not followers of Jesus. They're going to believe it. And here's what I really want you to get. The world will be a lot more persuaded by what you and I do in love for each other than what we choose not to do by ourselves. The world's going to be drawn to Jesus more by what you and I are doing rather than what you and I are not doing. Love can be adopting one of the 14.3 million orphans in the world that has no one to love them. Love can be taking just what we spend on ice cream and helping to save the million of people who die every year from malaria, or giving fresh water to the 3 billion people in the world. 8 billion here, 3 billion don't even have fresh water. Love can be visiting the sick. Love can be feeding the hungry. Love can be clothing the poor. Evangelism and sharing the gospel really has two parts to it. It's not just go and tell, but it's also go and show. It's important to tell, but you and I also have to be showing that love. They aren't necessary, but actions do speak louder than words. Why do you think it is we do what we do when we go to Honduras? That we don't just show up and share the gospel. That's part of it. But when we show up, we're there to say, hey, we love you. And here's what we want to do for you. We want to help you out. We want to build a school. We want to build a church. We want to give you some food. We want to help you out. Why? Because we have been blessed and we want to be a river of that love flowing through us. That's why we do it. Because you're more likely to listen to someone you know loves you. Right? Than someone who doesn't. One of the ways you can tell if someone is a police officer of the law is how? They wear a badge. They can say they're a police officer all they want, but what are you going to do? You're saying, well, show me your badge. Let me see that badge. There is a badge that you and I can wear every day, and that is a badge of love. That badge will do two things. First, it will tell us that we are followers of Jesus. Look at 1 John chapter 3, verse 14. I'm almost finished. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers and sisters. The one who does not